Got yourself a Honda CA125, so known as Rebel. It's not new and it's got licking forks. That's an MOT failure, isn't it? Well, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Let's handle this in a simple garage. See what we can do. Rule number 1. Do not drink this when you are doing this. Don't drink any alcohol when you're working on your motorcycle. And don't do what I do. Fuck, that's good. 2. Very important. Secure the motorcycle so it doesn't follow you when you work on it. The best way you can. Paddock stand should do the job just fine. Now that it's solid, we need to get the front wheel off the ground. Now let's remove the mudguard and the brake caliper and the speedo cable. It's always a good idea to put the bolts and screws and nuts, everything you take off, from the place where they belong. So later on, you don't need to look for them. We've got many of them laying around. And you know where they came from. Now it's time to remove the wheel. And to do so, we need to loosen up or completely remove the pinch bolt. There's only one on this model of the bike. And it happens to be 12mm spanner socket, which is the same as the brake caliper bolts. And now the axle itself is free to move. Size 17 ring spanner. Now at this stage, remember what spaces and which side you got on the wheel. And again, good idea to keep it exactly like you came off the bike, so you don't lose your shit. Done. Now, before we go any further, it's a good idea to crack open these top of the forks over here, these bolts here, bolts, nuts, captive nuts, however you call them. Don't open them all the way, just crack them open once they still clamp in triple trees. Literally crack them open. That's all you need to do. That's it. Not even a quarter of a turn. Just crack them open. It's forward thinking, will pay off later on. That's it. Once this is cracked open, I mean literally cracked open, you can loosen up the pinch bolts on the bottom triple tree and the top yoke as well. And most likely we'll need to remove the indicators. If one of these guys doesn't want to come out, it's very stuck, give it a gentle tap on the end of a Allen key over here with a hammer. And pray for the best. There we go. They don't need to come all the way out. Just loosen them up. Now we got 1, 2, 3, 4 pinch bolts. Loosen up. Indicators are loose as well. So in theory, the fork legs should come out. And yes, they do. Right. And left. Now at this stage, if you don't have manual and you can't check it online, it's a good idea to take some pictures right now with your mobile phone or anything else. Take pictures, the things they were before and the things they coming apart, so you need to put them back together later on in the reverse order. But this, when it gets slightly bit more complicated, it's still not black magic. Nuts and bolts. Let's do this. Right, let's work on a fork, on the left fork right now, because it's slightly easier. It's got the brake caliper mount, so we can put it kind of in a vise and work on it this way. Right there we've got Allen head bolt, and it's a good idea to crack it open, not fully open, crack it open right now when the fork is still in one piece before removing the top bolt. So we'll put it gently in the vise and we see whether we can crack it open right now. If you have just regular Allen keys like I do, don't have the socket for it, that won't reach, so you need to use it this way. Make sure it fits nicely there. Step spanner, and let's crack it open. One sharp move and you should crack it open. There we go. That's all we need. Now the reason we did a couple of steps just before, I said thinking ahead. Trying to undo this bolt right now, the whole thing is spinning freely, and there's no way of clamping that in a vise because you will damage this tension. That's not a good idea. And trying to hold this, you know, when somebody's trying to undo this nut, you need to have arms made of steel, and that wood probably still wouldn't work. So that was the forward thinking with this bolt. The one underneath, once the whole thing is together and there's pressure, there's spring pressing, this little bolt over there that we just cracked open is connected to a damper rod inside, and the damper rod pretty much spins around with the bolt. So we've removed this one, remove all the spring and the guts from the inside. There will be no pressure on the damper rod, and removing that bolt, it's possible, but it's a pain in the ass to do it later. That's why we cracked it open right now before we go any further. But that's out of the way, let's move on. Okay, let's get this thing open. What we need to start with, undoing this nut, this bolt all the way up. You need to be careful here because inside is a spring which is under pressure. It's probably this much of it will be sticking out when we finish with it. So the last thing you want to do is just look into it and undo it, because you can lose your eye or lose your tooth or whatever. The way I like to do it, get yourself a rag. I've got an old towel over here and I got a socket that fits this just fine. Right, we loosed it open, we cracked it open before, so it's loose. Put a towel over it, hold it down, and ever so gently undo it. Keep your face away from it, yeah, point it somewhere else. There's some pressure on it, it's not massive, it's not gonna explode. There you go. I just dropped that nut, but this is how much spring is sticking out of it. It's about 2 inches, so all this is under pressure. It's not massive pressure, but still you don't want that to hit you in the face. Now this is open, we can remove all the guts and drain the oil. Before you do that, make sure you got the nut that was on top, and there's a O-ring over here, rubber O-ring. Don't lose this shit, you need to put it back together. Now that's nasty, that's not how fork oil should look like, and it stinks as well. I poured it to a measuring cup. Manual says it should have about 237 mil. It doesn't, it's got 150, so it's missing about, yeah, missing a third of a fluid probably. There's probably still some left in the inside, tiny little bit, but most of it probably leaked out over the years. So yeah, let's strip it down. Now let's remove the dust seal. Depends what kind of replacement you've got. You want to be very careful with it. Depends what condition it is. I ordered a replacement, both seal, the internal seal, and a dust seal. It's probably a good idea to replace both at the same time, so I don't need to be too worried about it. Still, take care, you know, gently with tiny screwdriver, pry it up open, and just lift it up. Yeah. Now, important part is, that's the first thing you remove. We're gonna lay it down on the bench, left to right, as it came up. So it came out this way, I'm gonna lay it down flat on the bench this side, first thing on the right. That's my first component, exactly how it was on the fork. Now inside there's a seal which we need to replace. There's some nasty shit as well because water was leaking around there. But you can see over here, there's a circlip, metal circlip. We need to remove that before we can remove the seal. Again, very gently, there are 4 notches in it. Very gently with a screwdriver, work your way around it, and it will come loose. If it's okay condition, like this one is, it don't need to be replaced, we can reuse it, but be very gentle with it. And now, once you got it out, let me back you up. Don't be tempted to pull it out this way because you will scratch the surface of the fork. Up, all the way up. And again, I put it next to my dust seal because the second thing that came out of the fork. There you go, second thing out of the fork, exactly like it came out. Now it's a good idea to remove that bolt on the bottom that holds the damping rod, because we cracked it open before. Should be a walk in the park. There we go. It's out. By the magic power of gravity, we got it out. Remember, there's a copper washer on the end of that bad boy. Don't lose this. Right guys, now with these few simple steps, there's nothing else holding the fork stanchion from the actual fork leg. So to remove that seal, we're going to use the actual stanchion as a pulley hammer. Couple of sharp moves, and we out just like that. Now let's focus on what's going on here. So first thing to come out is the actual seal, which you need to replace all the way up. And again, put it down, and the third thing, came out from the fork exactly as it came out, not upside down, exactly as it came out. Next thing is a spacer. Yeah. And the last thing is a sliding Teflon rod. Out. Last thing inside is a damper rod inside the actual fork. Right, this part over here, you don't need to remove this. There's a Teflon washer, I believe that's Teflon washer. Super smooth, make sure it's good condition. You can pop it out with a screwdriver, but you don't need to. You know, it slides perfectly inside that leg. Leave it as it is. If it's good condition, there's no cracks, leave it as it is, don't worry about it. The last thing that's inside the actual fork leg is this little bushing kind of spacer that goes inside, right in the bottom of that fork leg. Lay it down on your bench so you know which order you came out. At this stage it's a good idea to inspect your fork leg for any cracks, especially around this collar over here. If the previous owner hit the curb or something, you know, it may put a lot of pressure on the fork stanchion, fork leg, so make sure there's no cracks in the aluminium. This one is lovely. I'll take this opportunity to give it a good clean over here, but most importantly inside, get rid of all the rust, corrosion and that kind of crap that's in there. Same with the fork leg as well. Do not rub it down with any sandpaper or steel wool or anything like this. Just give it a good clean with soft gloves, and that should be just fine. Hang on a second, something is not right. We're not even halfway there and I'm already out of beer. Gotta sort it out. Look what I found. Cheers. Yeah, that's better. Let's get back to work. Right, so a little bit later, I've got all the parts nice and clean, especially inside as well. What you want to worry about is this ridge over there, you know, make sure all the crap is gone from there, also from underneath there. All nice and clean, ready to be put together. Degrease the spring as well, and clean this inside and out. The thing to look after on these fork stanchions is this bottom part. If there's any pitting in the chrome, any rust, any rusty spots, the most likely, if it's bad, most likely need to be replaced. If it's very light, you can probably polish it out with a bit of Autosol or something like in a very mild polish paste and a soft cloth. The top of the stanchion is not so important. I've got very light pitting in chrome, but nothing up to here probably gets below the fork seal, which is causing the problem. If that was heavily pitted and chromed, that probably needs to be replaced or re-chromed if you know somebody who can do it professionally, but most likely needs to be replaced. Up here is not so important, but under any circumstances do not run any sandpaper on it, not even steel wool. That would probably damage the surface of the stanchion. But these are pretty good condition, especially over here. A bit of pitting over here, not to worry about. Lovely condition, can be put back together. Also these guys, I've got them the way they came out of the fork, right on the very bottom. There's a spacer, washer, the actual seal which we need to replace, a circlip and a dust seal which we need to replace as well. Don't need to clean these parts because they're going to be replaced with the new ones. These are clean, came out really nice, I'm happy with them. Inspect for the damage, everything is fine. Obviously second fork leg is exactly the same inside, they're identical. So once we got these bad boys replaced, we can put it back together. Right guys, now we have everything lovely and clean. Let's put it back together in a reverse order. Right guys, so first thing that came out right on the bottom of the fork leg was this little duffer. And this little duffer sits on the bottom of a dumping rod over here. I can be a bit confused in which way does it go, because it fits perfectly both ways, one way or the other way. Fits slightly better this way. The chamfered edge goes to the top. There's a little circlip over here, holds it together, and there's like a groove in there. So the chamfered edge goes on the top. It can be a little bit confusing, so as I mentioned before, this is where manual comes handy. I printed this out from an actual manual, and it tells you exactly which order it goes, and tells you the position of that little thing, spacer, whatever that is. So that goes in the bottom of a dumping rod, and the best way is to put it in, hold it like this basically, and slide the forklift on top of that. Just like that. Next thing is the bolt right on the bottom of it. Don't forget the bolt comes with a copper washer, crash washer. Don't lose it. If necessary, replace it. Advisable to replace it with a new one. And this little thing, as you remember, goes right on the bottom. We're going to screw in the dumping rod in there. If it spins around right now, just get it started. Extend that dumping rod. Put a little bit of pressure on the end like that. And that should give you enough resistance, enough grip to hold it in place. And once you screw it in, you can feel it pulling the stanchion back on a little bit, ever so gently. Don't need to lean on it. Just extend it and nip it up by hand for now. I will do for now. We're going to come back to it, tighten it up right later on. Now let's slide it all back together in reverse order. This little pieces came out basically. So that was first, second, third, fourth and fifth. We need to just reverse the order. So the first thing go down is going to be the upper bushing. Drop it in gently through the top. Should slide nicely on the fork. Drop it in there. Next thing was that washer spacer. Again from the top of the fork, gently drop it in there. See that nicely. Now at this stage we need to stop a little bit, and before we go any further and install our brand new seal on it, we need to drive that upper bushing in its place. There's like a little groove reset that sits for it. And professionals, which is not me, use a seal driver, which is a tool that goes over the fork leg, adjustable, made to specific different forks and stuff. But this tool is quite expensive and it's very rare. And how often are you going to do this really? How often are you going to change the fork seals on your bike? So investing in a tool like this is not always necessary, but we can get around it. What I've got here is a piece of quite hard plastic tubing, which is perfect, happened to be perfect, goes over the fork leg with a very little, not fork leg, the stanchion, very little room, and fits right on top of the bushing. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to whap it a couple of times with a hammer from the top and hoping that's going to get in place. So I've got the rubber mallet here, guys. Make sure it's square on the top. I'm going to gently, hopefully gently tap it in place, and that's going to work. And you can hear actually changing the pitch and sound. Pretty sure that's seated. Let's have a look. Yeah, that worked just fine. The spacer sits right in the right groove. So that's good news. Let's put the washer now on. Not the washer, sorry, the seal. And now is the actual seal that we got replaced over here. If you install it upside down, it's not going to work. It's going to start leaking all over again. So it's very important to install it the right way in. That's why I said when you get the old one, that's the old one, put it the way you take it out. So we're sitting like this in the fork, put it like this, don't put it upside down. This way will help you define which way is the right way. Again, if you get confused, check your manual, double check your manual, you know, original manual by Honda in this case, or any other bike you're working on. There's also a way to tell. There's like a little lip on the bottom of that seal, and that's basically what's the main sealing unit over here is. So there is wrong way and the right way of putting this in. Yeah, a little bit of rubber grease all over the seal is not going to hurt it. In fact, I would say it's highly advisable. On the outside and on the inside. You don't need to go crazy on it, but it's rubber against metal. It's always a good idea to ease the way that's supposed to go in. Yep. Now there's a little trick I learned some time ago. This is just quite a thick plastic bag. My sprocket has been delivered for the bike. So what I do, I cut the thin strip of it like this, very thin. And when the bike is brand new, you probably don't need to worry about it. But as I said, you know, this it's 1999. It's been on the road for some time. The stanchion is actually not in bad condition, but as I mentioned on the top, especially on the triple tree clamps, there's a slightly bit of, you know, chrome pitting and bit of corrosion. It's not too bad in this case, but it can be worse in your case. Obviously, if it's really bad here, that needs to be replaced. But this part we don't need to worry about it until we need to put the seal over it. And if we slide the seal straight over the top, chances are that if it's bad condition, the chrome pitting will damage that seal, and all our hard work will be pretty much useless. So what I like to do, is wrap that piece of plastic, cut it to size, wrap it around the fork leg, and then drive my seal on top of that. Create like a little cone. Can be a bit tricky. So it is slightly more tricky than I thought, doing it one-handed anyway. So I put a fork leg in a vise. And gently slide it on together with your plastic thing until you pass all the nasty stuff. Oops, sorry. Until you pass all the nasty stuff, all the corrosion. When you get to the very bottom of it, you can remove the plastic sleeve guide, and the seal should sit nicely in the groove. Now we need to drive that seal beyond the level we can put the circlip on. The circlip comes next, that's what holds it in place. And again, my little tube comes like a treat because it's perfectly flat on the bottom and it's plastic, so it's not going to damage it too much. We're going to be very gentle. Just try to push in by hand until I see that groove. Beautiful. Groove is now visible. Let's install the circlip. Right, so once that seal is in the groove, installing circlip should be hopefully easy. Again, slide the circlip on top. Don't be tempted to push it this way, you may scratch the stanchion. That's not a good idea. Slide it on the top, put it in there, start on one way and just work your way in. Again, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Find that place in the groove. Aim yourself with a tiny screwdriver. Be careful. Don't scratch your shit, don't damage the seal. Take your time and it will nicely pop into place. Just like that. Job done. That circlip is in place, and the last thing to go is a dust seal that goes on top of that. I got a new one as well. Bit of rubber loop doesn't hurt to go around the groove over there inside. At this stage we don't need to worry about using the plastic part. That is not as important as the actual seal. That should just slide in place nicely. Now, Honda manual says that these forks hold about 230 ml of fluid, of oil. So I'm going to go ahead and measure up exactly that much in my little measuring jug. That should do it. So let's pour it in, see what happens. Now very gently you can pump up the fork leg. But I said very gently. If you go too much to the top, it can explode on you, because there is obviously, we need to fill up the fork leg over here. Make sure it's not leaking from underneath. Very gently pump it up. Air will be escaping. You may hear some bubbles. Don't spray yourself in the face when you do that. Right, after a few minutes of doing this, I'm pretty happy with what I'm getting there. I'm going to drop the spring in there very gently and watch that oil level, because obviously it's going to raise slightly. Are we good? And the last thing is to install that cap. I like to put a little bit of grease on the thread. It's a very fine thread. Inspect the O-ring, the rubber O-ring, if necessary. That needs to be replaced. This one is in decent condition, so I'm going to leave it there as it is. get myself socket so I get a better grip on it, preload it, and then very carefully push it down in a spring. And while I push it, I'm going to try turn the forks, both the fork leg and the cap the opposite direction. Hopefully I can get some patches. Be very careful with it, because you can just, if you put like 1 or 1/4 of a turn, you can still spring back and hit you in the face, so be very careful around here. Find yourself some anchor point. Let's try this again. Turning the actual fork onto the nut until it's seated all the way. There you go, that's rebuilt. Once it's in place, we can tighten it up, but it's nice and springy as it should be. Give it a good pump. That feels lovely. No more leaking forks on this bad boy. Inspect the leak, if there's any leaks from underneath here, from that little guy. You need to be tightened up later on, and now is a good time to do this. There you go guys, one fork leg fully rebuilt, and it's working lovely. No leaks, it's just as it should be. The second fork leg is exactly the same, because they're nearly identical. So all the insides repeat on the second one, and then we're going to whip it back on the bike. Right, we put it back together on the bike in reverse order as we took it off. In rocket science, is it? Let's do this. And just like that, the bike is back on the ground and the fork seals has been replaced. Beautiful, beautiful job. Torque everything up to manufacturer specifications. That's very, very important. Double check, triple check, quadruple check. All the fasteners, all the bolts, all the nuts. Make sure there are no leaks. Make sure everything is as it should be. Tighten up to the right torque specs. As I said, check it, you know, as many times as it's necessary. Pump up that front brake before you go on the road. Other than that, it wasn't that difficult after all. Your bike is back on the road, you will pass the MOT. Pump those forks up and down a few times. Check for any leakage over here. If we did everything well, there should be no signs of oil on those forks. Other than that, the bike is back on the ground and as smooth as you like it. Well, there you go guys, that wasn't that difficult after all. But if you do get stuck, if you're doing it yourself, and if you get stuck, seek help of a professional mechanic, you know, get it delivered to the garage if you can. Garages and the guys running the garages need your money too, so if you get stuck, by all means seek help of a professional. Don't ride your bike if you're unsure, you know, what's happening. But if you're confident with nuts and bolts, that's relatively simple fix. Alright guys, I hope that helps. Until next time, have a beer, rock hard, and I'll see you very soon.